To look at how tonearms came into existence, we do need to start off with the gramophone, and that's going to take us all the way back to 1870. And that's not when the gramophone was existed, but it's when this guy, Emil Berliner, a German immigrant Jew, landed in New York. So Berliner started out working a series of menial jobs. I think one was washing the tubes in a laboratory. I think another one, I think he might have been working at something like a laundromat or something. But they were pretty menial. And this guy, like, what a drive he must have had, because he lived in a boarding house while he was doing these jobs, so kind of surrounded by people and not a lot of room, but he set up a laboratory somewhere in the boarding house. I wish there was a photo of this, because this must be incredible to look at. And it was here that he started investigating early telephone communication experiments, which were slightly different to the way that the Bell Telephone Company was doing things. He was doing these experiments in his boarding house, and from there he managed to get hired by the Bell Telephone Company, who were obviously the people who made telephones, invented telephones, were spreading that technology across America. And when he got hired, he carried on with those experiments for a little bit and then just lost interest. And what he was really interested in was how could you record sound and then reproduce it. So rather than kind of a live interaction over the phone through electricity, actually how could we record a sound, store that, and then play it? So it was during this time that Berliner developed the gramophone, which used a large horn to acoustically amplify the soundbox, this kind of acoustic proto cartridge, and the needle on this soundbox would run across a groove in a shellac record, and the little vibrations as it was going along would move a rubber diaphragm, and that diaphragm would create movements in air pressure, and then that would be amplified by the large horn. And by doing this, Berliner realized a lot of ideas kind of started by somebody called Charles Cros, or Cros, I don't know how to pronounce this one, but he was a French inventor, and another French scientist called Édouard-Léon Scott de Martenville. That's a mouthful. And Berliner realized a lot of the ideas that we take for granted today, such as the spinning platter, spinning a black recorded disc, the needle's movement in a spiral groove. We'd even recognize a lot of the metal stamping processes that we use today to make vinyl from when he first started producing shellac records and then wanted to take those on for mass manufacture so that more people could get more records and also they could be widely distributed and mass produced from one recording. At this point in the story of the tonearm, though, it's time to turn away from Berliner and towards Eldridge Johnson, who he was one of Berliner's machinists, and while they were working together, he helped to develop some of those things I was talking about earlier. So he helped to improve the soundbox, which was, like I say, the acoustic proto cartridge. It worked with a needle attached to a diaphragm, and I'm going to link to this down below. There's a really excellent illustration made of this that hopefully I can use. Maybe I can't, but I'll definitely link that below, because it can be quite hard to picture this device, but once you see this image, it really just kind of, it makes it really clear. Even more complicated than the soundbox was his spring-loaded motor, which is, I can't even begin to describe it in words. Just watch the video in the link, because that is amazing. Now, if we consider how the horn balanced on the needle on the soundbox, some of the weight is taken off by the assemblies kind of that you might see pictured, but a lot of that weight was just going straight onto the needle. You might wonder how the shellac even moved at all. How did the disc spin? How did anything come out that was even remotely audible? And it was okay, but one of the things that Eldridge Johnson realized was there's too much weight going onto the needle, and we can get the needle to track the grooves better, produce a better sound wave if there is less weight on the cartridge. And we might think that the whole assembly of the horn attached to the cartridge with something kind of counterbalancing it, you might think of that as a quasi-tonearm, but not really. Really, it was in 1902 when Johnson made an additional tube that had a pivot hanging off of the end of the tube, this was when the tonearm was created. And by adding in that additional tube and that pivot point, Johnson was able to take a lot of the weight of the horn off of the needle, which allowed the needle more freedom of movement. It took a lot of weight off of the record surface. So these two things, the freedom of movement really helped with the high fidelity of the sound reproduction, because the needle being able to track better meant that you had a better wave being produced basically from the soundbox. And it was also having less weight on the record's surface meant that the record was less likely to wear and get damaged, which also meant that people's shellac records lasted longer. One of the things that I find so interesting about this is how the freedom of movement of the needle improved sound quality. And this is really still the case today. The freedom of movement in your tonearm is going to affect the way that your cartridge is able to trace the vinyl grooves, which in turn affects the sound quality from the grooves. The sound quality of your signal that's going all the way through your system to your other transducer, your drivers. The more you improve the signal from your cartridge, the more you improve the signal throughout the system. It's kind of that classic, rubbish in, rubbish out case. And we're continuously trying to improve freedom of movement for the cartridge and also stability for the cartridge, because that's the other thing, is that you can have freedom of movement, but if you don't have the right kind of stability and rigidity, that is also going to be detrimental to your cartridge's signal. So when we're developing, we ask ourselves questions like, which material out of 20 is going to sound the best? And how should this stuff be shaped and weighted and joined together and combined in order to produce something that's going to bring, the freedom of movement, but also the freedom from vibrations and resonance that are going to affect your cartridge's signal as it's playing back. And the cartridge is still performing a mechanical task. It might not be that we're creating a whole new component to do this, like the tonearm, but there are still loads and loads of developments that you can make. It's just as true today as it was in 1902 that the tonearm greatly improves the performance of your cartridge. Tonearms need to be designed not only to minimize vibration, but also designed and tuned by ear to take care of that cartridge signal, to make sure that it's sounding as lifelike as it can. There are many subpar examples on the market. Origin live arms offer better performance than any others at an equivalent cost. It might shock you how much a high-performance tonearm can get from the cartridge that you already have, even in the turntable that you already have, even in the system you already have. Like with Eldridge Johnson, that freedom of movement allows your needle to produce a better signal, and a better signal affects the whole rest of your system, and it will produce a better sound. If you've compared a turntable with its digital counterpart, you pretty much know that vinyl has better transients. And it's also the tonalities across the frequency range which help your instruments to sound more natural, more lifelike. A saxophone a bit more like a saxophone. If you want to find out more about our award-winning range of tonearms, if you check in the link below, you can go through to our website. We make tonearms starting from £480 all the way up to super high-end designs which are £26,000, which sound incredible. If you're looking for kind of simpler, lower cost upgrades for your turntable, we make upgrades that start at £26 and reach up to £295. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's 2025, over 100 years of development in tonearms, and here's to 100 more, and Emil Berliner and Eldridge Johnson.